Okay, look, I get it. The finger point in a vacuum, all other things aside, the finger point was classic. Instant meme. You know the one where the blonde WNBA player was pointing her finger at another player during that dust up back in June during a game. But the one doing the pointing, Sophie Cunningham, the guard for the Indiana Fever, gave an ESPN interview opposing trans athletes in women's sports. And look, she is a terrible human for thinking that, but what happened next is the actual story here. Because Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt announced that Donald Trump is personally, quote, following the saga and called the backlash astonishing. The Department of Education posted about it. Stephen A. Smith even backed her up by proposing a separate league for trans athletes, apparently without clocking that we've already tried separate leagues for minority classes in this country, and they didn't work out so well. And Sophie Cunningham has now become MAGA's biggest new star, a star that MAGA thought they had in Caitlin Clark. And credit to the Guardian's Howard Bryant for bringing this up, but Cunningham has essentially stepped in to that role that the right originally wanted from Caitlin Clark. Because MAGA, all they want is an anti-black, anti-gay, anti-trans culture war mascot. And it's not new. But Caitlin Clark wouldn't give it to him because back when she was a rookie, conservative pundit and a man who has spent way too much time talking about Trump's balls. No, really, it's one of his books because he's an effing clown. Clay Travis was already out there calling Clark a victim of discrimination before she even entered the league in a, quote, white heterosexual women in a black lesbian league. Weaponizing race and sexuality in one sentence about women's sports from a guy who doesn't cover women's basketball for a living, pontificating to other people that don't watch women's sports, especially basketball. Now Clay Travis is running the same play 2 years later with Sophie Cunningham. Hell, they've tried making the fact that Caitlin Clark gets fouled hard a racist thing, but that doesn't stick. So you have people like Clay Travis absolutely giddy that they have found someone else to rally around in Sophie Cunningham. And I've got to ask, what would it actually take for the people that run these leagues to have a backbone, to have a spine, to protect their players from becoming political footballs when they don't intend to, instead of just issuing statements after the fact? Let me know in the comments. It's one thing if an athlete spouts off, but there are certain athletes that want no part of the political discourse, and the league does nothing because that anger, that rage still drives ratings. And I've got to tell you, by the way, women's sports, one of the coolest sports experiences I've ever had, I went to Lille, France, 2024, the Paris Games, and I got to watch both the U.S. men's and women's basketball teams play in the Olympics. It was early in the game, so the teams hadn't really gelled yet. The men still dominated because they had the likes of LeBron, Curry, Embiid, Durant, Anthony Edwards, but they looked sloppy, and they looked lackadaisical because they were still figuring things out, and they weren't going to go all out that early in the Olympics because it's a long road. But when it came to the women, holy cow, Asia Wilson, the rest of them, pure fire from the athletes on the court. I mean, this was a violent, physical, and tough game, way more so than the men's game. It was awesome to watch. So yes, I am a fan of women's basketball. And I can tell you, it's not, as Clay Travis says, a black lesbian league. It is a league for everybody. And anyway, Caitlin Clark, to her credit so far, has mostly refused to play along with this MAGA narrative. And Sunday, she was asked directly about this whole circus. And her answer was, quote, "It's not really a discussion we have in our locker room. That's for leagues and governing bodies to work with their athletes on," end quote. Then she cut off a follow-up question with, "I just answered you."
It's for leagues and the governing bodies to work with their athletes to find solutions, but our focus is on basketball, and that's what we talk about and how we can get wins, and obviously we didn't do that tonight, so need to find an area to improve in that way.
And of course, MAGA has called her a coward for giving a non-answer. Meanwhile, Cheryl Reeve, the coach of the Minnesota Lynx, she wore a shirt that said "Trans kids belong" right there at the game against the Fever. And Sophie Cunningham got booed every time she touched the ball. It's funny, sports arenas are really good at booing people who are absolute assholes Just ask Donald Trump. Now, of course, people like Laura Ingraham have to speak up. Laura Ingram's response to this basketball game was to announce she, quote, fears for their safety. Quote, from obsessed militants capable of anything. I thought the weird obsessed militants were watching Laura Ingram's show, not women with actual talent and actual success. And look, this is a tale old as time. Fox News and MAGA, they're great at inventing a danger that isn't there so that nobody has to talk about real issues. Like how a bunch of grown adults with television contracts and your own government are using a women's basketball league as a delivery system for things they would have gotten walked out of their own building for saying at work before Donald Trump came along. And now they want the WNBA to become their league of hate. Thank God it hasn't happened. And that's why I'm going to ask that you hit that notification icon. Because my daughter, an athlete, a young woman, she needs to know that the adults in the room, the real adults in the room, aren't hateful bigots.